Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1988 horror film, Night of the Demons. Now, this is a film that I'd heard about, but I really did not get the chance to see it until fairly recently. And I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was a great film. I didn't think it was a masterpiece. But I can see why it has a cult following. I can see why there's a lot of people who love this movie. And if you're one of those people, I have no issue with that. It's just one of those movies that I wasn't totally enamored with the entire film. That being said, there are things about this movie that I absolutely loved. And I would say I probably love just as much as the fans of this film do. So it's one of those movies that at the end of the day, it was entertaining enough. I wasn't too bored by it. And there were a fair number of things about it that I did like. But there were some particular elements and aspects of it that fell a little short and a little flat for me. So that's really what ultimately prevented this film from being great or one of my favorites. But I'm still glad I checked it out, though, because there definitely are some highlights. This is a great Blu-ray by Scream Factory. I think they did a Steelbook release recently. I think it has a new transfer, but the transfer on this still looks really good. And this has an excellent documentary on it called You're Invited, The Making of Night of the Demons, which has interviews with pretty much everybody involved with the movie. I was honestly really impressed with how many people they were able to get for the documentary. And that's where I'm getting most of my information or bits of trivia or behind the scenes stuff that I will be mentioning in this particular video. So even if you're not the biggest fan of this film, or even if you haven't seen it and you're just kind of on the fence about it, I do recommend picking up this Blu-ray sometime just for the documentary alone. It also has a commentary track and a few other things, but to me personally, the real shining attraction, so to speak, on the Blu-ray is the documentary. Now, the film is directed by Kevin S. Tenney, and this is the second film that he did after his directorial debut in Witchboard. And he wanted to do something a little bit different with this particular film. In fact, he was hired to do Night of the Demons after something occurred with the original director. He decided to do something else. So the producers of Night of the Demons, who I believe also produced Witchboard, and I think the writer of Witchboard also wrote Night of the Demons, Joe Augustin. So they were very familiar with Kevin, so they decided, let's hire Kevin. He knows what he's doing, we know what we get with him, and we know we can trust him with this particular project. Now, initially, it was called Halloween Party, and the producers and the director, they're all interviewed on the documentary, and they're talking about how they love the title, and they're bummed that they weren't able to use it, and the reason why they weren't able to use it is due to the fact that I believe one of the producers of Halloween threatened a lawsuit, so they decided to change the title to Night of the Demons. There was also another potential alternate title called Demon Boogie, which is awful. So, I mean, I'm really glad they didn't go with that. The movie would have been dead. Completely dead in its tracks before it even had a chance for a lot of people if it was called Demon Boogie. And then we're talking about like the late 80s. Like Boogie? Like this isn't the 70s. This isn't fucking the height of disco. But anyway, that's something that's on IMDb though. That could just be a bunch of bullshit. But I just wanted to mention it, you know, because I thought it was pretty funny. But anyway, Halloween Party was the original title. They even had a poster for it. And I'm glad they went with Night of the Demons. It's a better title. It's sinister, it's dark, it's cool. Halloween Party sounds like the most generic slasher movie ever made. So I'm really glad they did not ultimately go with Halloween Party. I don't think it's that great of a title. I really don't. It sounds like a Halloween ripoff. It sounds like like I said, just an incredibly generic slasher film, which is really not what this movie is. This is a film that's taking slasher elements, but putting some spins and new things on them that, in a lot of ways, kind of reminded me of what was going on with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise around this particular time period, with the unique sort of original ways of killing people and so on and so forth, sort of the MTV approach to horror. So, yeah, Night of the Demons is the better title, and it was just fate that it would that would ultimately be the name of this movie. Now, the direction by Kevin S. Tenney, I honestly think is terrific. I thought he did a great job directing this film. There are some really standout, spectacular shots in this. He does a really cool homage or take on Sam Raimi's Evil Dead direction with the chaotic camera work. I also felt that he did a good job bringing the atmosphere of the location of the abandoned house to life, with all the smoke and all of the other aspects of the legitimate real-life setting of this abandoned house. And he ran a really tight ship, but at the same time it wasn't too tight. So he enabled the cast to have fun and to party. And that was something that I think this film definitely benefited from, because you can feel that passion and that fun in every frame. It's one of those productions where there were times where it was absolutely grueling, especially for the actors and actresses that had to wear demon makeup. I mean, there are days where they're sitting in a makeup chair for 6 hours, and then they have to shoot for the rest of the day. And then there's other days where, when the makeup is more extensive, they sit in the chair for 12 hours or close to that, and then shoot for the rest of the day after that. So, yeah, for certain people involved with this production, it was absolute hell. And I think Tenney did a good job, making it still an environment that wasn't as hellish as it could have been. It still made it a production that people were glad to be a part of. He made it a set that people wanted to be on, and that's something that kind of gets overlooked when it comes to directors and when it comes to their job. There's a lot of ways that is their job as a director, is not only to be the one behind the camera, but the one behind everything that's going on in the set, stuff like that. So it's written by Joe Augustin. And this screenplay, to me personally, it's okay. This is a script that has some real standout elements. For one, it's a new, fresh take on demon possession. That was something that I really definitely liked quite a bit. Because at this point, there had been nothing but a million different versions of The Exorcist, and it was really refreshing to have a demon possession movie that wasn't trying to tread the same ground. It was breaking new ground for once, taking an old concept of the old dark house and adding demon possession to it, and adding slasher elements and stuff like that, and putting a new enough spin on older ideas to make it feel fresh and unique, and not as stale as a lot of these other demon possession movies were in terms of the overall plot. I also liked the fact that this screenplay, it's not afraid to have a sense of humor. So there's a lot of really hilarious moments in this film, some really memorable lines of dialogue. Eat a bowl of fuck. I'm here to party. And just, there's a lot of fun lines of dialogue like that. I mean, there's an exchange with Suzanne, Linnea Quigley's character, and a bunch of convenience store clerks that is just an absolute riot. I'm looking up the quote here. This line, this scene just always cracks me up. She's like, "Do you guys have sour balls?" "Why, sure we do." "Too bad. I bet you don't get many blowjobs." Oh, man. Oh, shit. I mean, even stuff like when Franny is talking to Max when they are making out in a coffin, and she's like, "Oh, Max, I don't bend that way." And just when you're first introduced to the characters of Angela and Suzanne, and they're talking about what they're gonna do, you know, for the party. Or and Angela has that moment where she's like, "We're gonna scare the shit out of them." So I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fun lines of dialogue. The "eat a bowl of fuck" was actually improvised by the actor who played Stooge, Hal, and it was something that he wanted to put in there, Hal Havens, because he had read something. I think he had read, I believe it was a book, the book Wired, and it was talking about John Belushi, and it mentioned something that he was on stage, or he was set to go on stage for Second City, and he wanted to say "eat a bowl of fuck." And Second City was like, "No, you can't do that," because this is at the time where, you know, saying stuff like that on stage could actually get you arrested. So he was, you know, John, he, you know, always the provocateur. He was like, "No, I want to say it," and the Second City reps are like, "If you say that, we're gonna take you off the team. We're gonna suspend you from the crew, from the Second City tour." And John didn't give a fuck. He didn't give a bowl of fucks. So he goes up on stage, and the first and the only thing he says on stage before he gets suspended for 2 weeks is "eat a bowl of fuck." And Hal really liked that, and he spoke to the director, Kevin S. Tenney, and was like, "Hey, I want to say this. Can I say this?" And Kevin's like, "Yeah." And I got the perfect place for you to say it too. So one of the most memorable lines of dialogue in the film was improvised, and was actually a line that was already said before by one of the most legendary comics of all time, in John Belushi. So I thought that was a really cool bit of trivia. Now, even though that line was improvised, there were other lines that weren't, that were still enjoyable. And for the most part, the characters, there was not the most character development with these roles. The film tries to do it with a few different characters, but it's kind of off and on in terms of its effectiveness. And I will say this, there really weren't any characters in this overall film that I hated or I didn't like. And I think a lot of that had to do with the genuine charisma and natural personality of the actors who were playing these roles. That being said, I feel that this film does have a really weak lead in Judy, and the most memorable and strongest characters out of the entire movie are the villains. Angela, Suzanne, Stooge. Those are the characters that really stick with you. I mean, I didn't mind Roger or Max or some of the other characters, but really the characters that stick with you are the villains, are the ones that wind up being possessed and terrorizing the other party guests. So this is one of those movies where the antagonists are, in a lot of ways, the strongest character, or the strongest characters, and that's not something that's novel to this movie. There's a lot of different horror films that are like that, but I don't know. I feel the film would have been stronger, and I would have liked the film more if it had a stronger lead. I also felt, and if it had a stronger mix of characters, because even though I don't hate any of the characters, some of them just were straight up cannon fodder. But I mean, the script has some really gonzo moments in it, though. For instance, the lipstick sequence, that is an absolute trip. It is such a surreal, just crazy, really strange sequence that is arguably the most standout scene in the entire movie. Then you have stuff like the dance scene with Angela, which I absolutely adored that sequence, and the reason why is not just because the actress was fucking drop dead gorgeous with her goth look and just her confidence and everything, Amelia Kinkade, but because she's a amazing talent as a dancer. So that's the other reason why I really loved that sequence. Um, but it's not really the screenplay that makes that sequence soar. It's Kinkade. It's her natural talent and ability. And what's crazy is that she almost didn't get this role. Kevin wanted someone else, but he quickly realized that this actress that he wanted, she couldn't dance, so decided to make a compromise and decided to go with Kinkade instead, and the rest is history. I mean, this film would not be, it would not have the cult following that it does without Kinkade, guaranteed. So anyway, I really don't know what else to really say about the screenplay. I mean, there were a few differences between the original draft and what they ultimately went with for the finished film. Apparently, the two survivors were not intended to be Judy and Roger initially. It was going to be Judy and her little brother, Billy, but they eventually decided against that because labor laws at the time would have made things really a pain in the ass to do things that way. And I'm glad they did, because the actor who plays Billy, really not that great of an actor. Even though, I mean, hey, he's got a really fun, memorable line of dialogue where he sees his sister's tits and he's just like, "Wow, bodacious boobies, sis. You keep on going, you'll have to hire somebody just to tie your shoes." But anyway, the kid was not the best actor, and the way the character was written, he was honestly kind of a brat. So I'm glad he wasn't one of the survivors, or really one of the main characters. And it opened the door for Roger, for a black man, for a black character, an African American character in a horror movie, to be one of the survivors, to be one of the last people standing. So that was a great step forward for the genre in a lot of different ways. So ultimately, it all worked out. That they had to do things differently. The climax is also going to be different. There was going to be a climax involving a wooden fence, and Angela was going to get stabbed, I believe, with a fence post or something of that order. But they weren't able to make that work, so they decided to go with the brick wall and the barbed wire. And I think that worked out better than the fence idea anyway. Although the climax was a little disappointing, because I think, honestly, they just ran out of money. I don't think they had the money to have an explosive climax that really would have put this film over the top for me. And as a result, it's just a very middling meh sort of climax for this Night of Terror. The demons just turn into poofs of green smoke. It's just, it's a little disappointing. Considering all of the other really great effects that you see by Steve Johnson and company, to just have a finale which is just poofs, just little poofs of green smoke. Also, there's this wraparound involving this old man who is a crudmudgeon and a just a total jerk off, And I get what they're going for, you know, the apples or the razor blades and whatever, but I, it's honestly something that feels like it's from a completely different movie. I don't know why that character is even in this film. It doesn't add anything to the overall plot, or it doesn't really connect to anything. Seems like it's just an excuse for more gore. And hey, you know, I like a good gore scene as well, but it just seemed a little gratuitous, as if like it didn't really have any other place in the film other than here's some more blood. Here's another opportunity for blood and guts. But there's really no guts, but I mean blood for sure. Um, but that could have been something that was added after the fact. I don't know if that was already in the screenplay at the start. It very well could have been though. So I mean, the screenplay, it's decent enough. It's got some fun lines of dialogue. There are some good characters that are memorable in different ways, but it lacks a strong, compelling lead. Some of the character development is a little weak, and then there are times where they try to go with more character development, but it just hurts the pacing because it's just not really that engaging. Um, and the climax is a little bit of a letdown. But I mean, like I said, that really could have just been due to budget. Now, it has a pretty great cast, though. Other than, I mean, the thing is, it has a great cast for a lot of the supporting roles, but for the main, you know, lead, it's at its weakest. Cathy Podewell, nothing against her, but I thought she was really quite awful. I thought her performance was quite putrid, to be honest, in this movie. Uh, it seems like in interviews she's more natural, she's more laid back, and none of that really shows up in this particular performance. So that might have been just because this was one of her first roles, her first big roles. So it might just be inexperience, but regardless, her performance is Barbie doll like. It's total plastic. It's like she's a Barbie doll come to life, and it's wooden, it's plastic, it's flat. It's just a really bad performance by an actress, if you ask me. And that brings the film down because that's your lead. That's your lead character. That's your main protagonist. Uh, but I mean, there's other characters though. There's other performances by other actors and actresses in this that are really quite good. I mean, Amelia Kinkade is Angela. She's sexy, but she's also sinister. The sequence with Stooge where she gives him a kiss and bites him is a effectively creepy moment. William Gallo is Sal. That's another guy who's not really the best actor, and I didn't really care for that character either. The film is trying to paint this character as initially as some kind of jerk. He's a prankster, kind of an asshole, and then as the film goes on, it's revealing this other side of him, trying to show him as a noble guy. That's all an act, but I didn't really buy it. So it was just one of those characters that I didn't think was really that strong. Um, Honestly, I wish that Phillip Tanzini's character, Max, I wish that those two swapped. I wish that Max was the one that had most of Sal's screen time, and you could have the Sal character take Max's screen time. Because I really like Phillip Tanzini as Max. I think he had a great amount of personality and charisma, and I really enjoyed seeing him. He reminded me a lot of Andrew McCarthy, and for some reason he just didn't get that many lines. He didn't get that many scenes, and more sequences went to Sal for whatever reason. Alvin Alexis I thought was awesome as Roger. I thought he was easily the best actor in the entire movie. Hey, hell, you could have had him be the lead. The film would have been stronger just with him as the lead too. Then you have Linnea Quigley, who is lovely as always as Suzanne. The supermarket the convenience store sequence, yeah. Mm-hmm. That one that's quite an eye opener, to say the least. Lance Fenton, who played Jay, he's a Ken doll. So you have the Barbie doll in Cathy Podewell, and then you have Lance Fenton as the Ken doll, and that character was just unlikable in multiple different ways. All we wanted to do was just get into Judy's pants. Hal Havens, though, Stooge, I would say Hal Havens he steals the show. Like, he's the one that has the most memorable lines of dialogue. He's the one that leaves the biggest impression, other than Kinkade. He was a total fucking douchebag, but Hal Havens played this character in a way with so much energy and so much genuine charisma that you enjoyed seeing him work, even though he's such a jerk. But yeah, I will say this: once he gets possessed, though, it's not really as fun, because it's just a bunch of growling and stuff. But before the possession and stuff, Stooge he's honestly quite spectacular. Allison Baron, I liked her. I thought it was really too bad what happened in the character of Helen. And if you ask me, she should have been the lead. If you want to have a female lead, final girl, and one other final guy, and Roger, have Allison Baron play the lead, Judy, instead of Podewell. Have Podewell play Judy. She already played Judy. Have Podewell play Helen. And I thought that would have been fine. No, Barron doesn't have the typical glamour magazine looks that maybe the producers were looking for the character of Judy, but she's pretty enough, and I thought she was a better actress. So honestly, I think the film would have been better too if she was the lead. Then you have Phillip Tanzini, like I said, who I really liked. The whole moment where he's peeking out the window while Stooge and his crew are struggling with their car, and he was like, "Hey," it's like, "Can we give you a hand?" And then he puts his hands out the window, and he's like, and then he pulls them back. He's like, "See ya." So I liked that line delivery. And Jill Terashita as Franny. Not really the greatest actress in the world, but it was nice to see an Asian actress in this kind of movie. And I thought she had some nice chemistry with Phillip. So overall, fun cast. Like I said, the villains really stand out the most. The guy who played the old man, he was pretty good too. I don't remember his name though off the top of my head. He was, I like to call him a dime store Don Rickles, because that's really what that character is in a nutshell. The film features a score by Dennis Michael Tenney, and I thought this score was fantastic. I loved this score for the most part, especially the opening credits theme. And speaking of the opening titles, I love the opening titles of this movie. The animation is awesome. It is really, really cool. It is so unique and different. And it's really a shame that the animator didn't really do any more titles for the rest of her career. She worked on a lot of Disney stuff, but for some reason never really got a chance to do the opening titles for another movie. After doing such a just killer job with the opening credits for this film. And speaking of music, I love the soundtrack for this film. That's one of the main things about this movie that I absolutely love. I love this soundtrack. I love Dennis Michael Tenney's Computer Date. I love his song The Beast Inside. I also really like the song Stigmata by Bauhaus that was used in the dance scene with Angela. And overall, just great soundtrack. A lot of really fun tracks and fun songs. I would say my favorite song would be "The Beast Inside" by Dennis Michael Tenney. And this features some absolutely fantastic special effects and marvelous makeup by Steve Johnson. He did the demon makeup for the film. He also did the sequence that with the lipstick in the breast. That sequence, I mean, when I first saw that sequence, I was just, whoa. Like, that was such a surreal, just absolutely crazy sequence. And it's a really great looking effect. It still looks great to this day. He made a gelatin cast of Linnea's chest and her breasts, and had this was a lot of it was a magic trick. The lipstick container had this spring in it where it could, like, go inside of itself. So when she would push it in, it would get smaller. So then she could more easily press her finger and the lipstick case into the fake breast. And because it was gelatin, once she put it in there, it automatically just filled up back in place. So then it looked like it was just seamless. And this is the kind of stuff that they would do nowadays with CGI, but back then you had to do it practically. In all honesty, I think it's a better looking effect than anything that they could do with computer generated imagery. And on top of that, Steve Johnson, the demon makeup, some of the best demon makeup out there. And after he did this movie, so many different people were copying his demon makeup because he didn't want to just do the Exorcist makeup, because it'd been there, done that. And he he spent all of his time doing this really elaborate thing with all these splotches and stuff. And then he realized he didn't have enough time to finish it. So then he's just like, fuck, what am I going to do? So then he just starts covering it all up. And then he discovered by accident the overall design that he decided to use for the demon makeup. And this is a project that he really wanted to go all out with as much as he could, as much as the budget would allow, because this was his first big film project for his studio. Initially, he was going to do effects for The Lost Boys, but something happened and he didn't get the job. So then he was in a scramble. He was in a rush to get a makeup job because he mortgaged things. He needed a job, otherwise he wouldn't be able to keep the doors open at his new business. So his new studio. So he wound up getting a call soon after, asking him if he wanted to do Night of the Demons, and he was like, absolutely. And the rest is history. Steve Johnson's actually interviewed on the documentary, and he's an absolute joy to watch him talk about his craft and what he did and how he did it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, some really, great effects for the most part. I will say this. It seems like they kind of just... And a lot of it, I think, just deals with the budget. Like, for instance, some of the deaths are pretty forgettable. One party goer gets their neck twisted or whatever. Another one, Max just gets crushed with a coffin by Stooge, and his arm gets cut off. So the severed arm can come to life later and jolt the audience. But there really isn't a lot of memorable kills. I will say that about this movie. This film does not have very many memorable kills in it. And so that's another thing that would have elevated the film a little higher for me, is if it had more memorable kills. Because other than the lipstick sequence, I mean, you have a few other, like, moments, but, like, it just isn't really that memorable in terms of the kills. It's more memorable in terms of its tongue-in-cheek sequences, like when Sal dies, there's a tombstone that appears out of nowhere that says Sal, and then died tonight. Stuff like that. But yeah, honestly, I'm trying to think of anything else that I can say about the movie. I mean, cinematography by Daniel Duncan. He did a good job with the cinematography, especially shooting the inside of the house. The editing by actually it's David Lewis. Daniel Duncan is the one that edited the film. My bad. The cinematography by David Lewis. He did a good job shooting the inside of the house and the effects and other moments like that. It was well edited by Daniel Duncan. Has a running time of like 89 minutes, and it does take a little bit to get going, but once it gets going, you can definitely have a good amount of fun with it. And it didn't cost that much to make, and it made a good amount of money. It made like $3.1 million in the box office, and that's not even with a wide release. For some reason, this film didn't really get a wide theatrical release. It only got a theatrical release in select cities in the United States. And it did really well in Detroit, and it did really well in some other places. And it probably would have done unbelievably well if it was released in all of the states. But for some reason, that never happened. So the film didn't make as much money as it would have. But it ultimately still found a pretty large audience on home video, and it's still beloved by many to this day. Now, like I said, it's a film that I'm not totally in love with, but it's a movie that I definitely do like and really love a lot of things about it. And honestly, the more I talk about it, the more I think about things, I gotta say this is definitely better than an average movie. This is definitely better than okay. I would say that I thought this was definitely above average. I thought it could have been great, but some things just didn't quite live up to their full potential. That being said, still a fairly entertaining horror film that I would definitely recommend to folks who haven't seen it yet, or folks that were kind of not really that big on it the last time around that they saw it. Keep in mind, it's not one of those horror films where it's really, honestly, that scary. I mean, when the demons start talking, it's your typical kind of, demon voices and stuff, and it has a lot of camp in it, so it definitely does handle things with its tongue planted firmly in its left cheek. But if you don't mind that kind of horror or that kind of mix, I definitely think that there's a lot to like about this film. I just personally feel that it just isn't quite as strong as it could be due to the lack of really strong leads and some other sort of some pacing issues in terms of how it's a little bit of a slow starter, and the fact that it doesn't really have that many memorable kills or gore sequences for the most part. A lot of it is quite subdued, and like I said, I think that's probably more budget related than anything else. But that's my long-winded and in-depth thoughts on Night of the Demons. I hope you enjoyed it, this review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.